Welcome, welcome very, very much to Conversation. As always, it's a pleasure to welcome to the program the guest now on today's program is Amy Shea. We have her, she's a writer and she studies human behavior in a systemic and important way. She's an observer of the human condition and that kind of thing. And she's a writer, and she's written a book we have displayed here. It's called Defending Happiness and Other Acts of Bravery, which is a very interesting title for the book and is written in a very interesting way. She's a really interesting writer. And Amy, welcome so very, very much to Manhattan Network and Conversations.
Thanks, Harold. Good to be here.
Like if I said, I'd appreciate if you could share with us. We're going to talk, we want to let you give you a chance to do a few readings from the thing, because your writing is very distinct and everything and funny and everything. But anyway, share your background, born and raised, educated a little bit if you would, and then we'll talk about the human condition and your writing and that sort of thing.
Sure. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and raised in a housing project in Staten Island. We moved there from Brooklyn when I was 5 years old, and so I lived in New York City until I was about 30 years old, and then I started living in other parts of the country. I published my first short story when I was 13 years old.
Wow,
so,
published at 13.
Actually, it was a story I sent in for a contest to a magazine. And they liked it so much they featured it as an article and reprinted it in school books.
Can you remember your attitude when that was published, or was it? I must have been a great honor or something, or a great boost to the. Self-esteem or something,
I felt it was pretty miraculous.
Absolutely.
I remember opening up the letter and asking me if I would sell it to them for $50.
Wow, $50!
And
you buy a lot of Tootsie Rolls for $50.
Well, what I did was I bought a maxi coat. I was very excited to actually go buy a coat.
Buy a what?
A maxi coat.
What is a maxi coat?
It went to the ground.
Oh, a big coat,
and it was very, very fashionable at the time.
And $50, it could have been made out of ermine.
So,
but that would have been a thing really important. I used to be happy when I got my my decoder ring from Little Orphan Annie or something that would come in the mail when I was young. That way, it would be a big event. And congratulations on that.
Thanks.
What was the story about? Can you remember it?
It was called The Beast in the Tunnel, and it was about a woman who was coming home late from work one night in Manhattan, and the sense that she was being followed.
Right.
And she goes, finally, the sound chases her. She hears this beast sound, and she goes into this subway tunnel, jumps on the tracks, and goes into a door that she had seen a workman duck into.
My goodness.
To try to escape the beast, and she hears the beast die under the wheels of the subway. And as she's sitting in there and hearing her own breath, she hears the sound of the beast breathing next to her. And the story ends that way. My
Lord, you had a ready-made,
I did. I had quite an imagination.
You can put it into a thing. There's that thing with Jodie Foster. Makes me think of that movie with Jodie Foster. I couldn't the name of it, where her husband had been killed and everything. And it's anyway, that's really an intricate story. And that was written as a sort of suspense thing. Or?
Yeah. And then they asked me to write another one actually, and I wrote another one about a woman who spends the night in a haunted house. And so I was very into, at that point, I was reading a lot of Sherlock Holmes, and I read from a very early age, and I devoured books. I still do, and so
was that the setting? Yeah, the family setting was one of intellectual encouragement.
Absolutely,
even when you were in the projects, it could be a challenge.
Yes,
right?
It was really interesting. We didn't have much money at all, but we had a lot of books.
A lot of books and a lot of intellectual encouragement.
Yeah, and my parents actually, both artists.
Artists.
Yes, my mother, a painter, a very, very good painter, actually, and my dad, a singer. He, went out and earned a living however he could, but he sang, and we were raised on Shakespeare in the Park, and we used to actually put on shows and perform Shakespeare in the house.
Wow,
that's I thought everybody was
like
that.
Right? That's great. That's really good. That home setting, I think, makes a lot of difference. You have siblings in that?
Yes, there were 7 kids.
7 kids in the projects.
Yes, very,
that's
very
a challenge,
big family.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And your mother painted. Did she paint? Was she acrylic, oil, or?
She actually did a lot of drawing, and then she worked. Yeah, she drew a great deal because that was easy. She had a sketch pad and pencils, and she could just go and she'd work in charcoal. But she also worked in acrylics and watercolor.
Yeah, the whole gamut, right?
Yeah.
Large, small. Did she show?
No, she never
didn't
did.
Show. No,
she just always did it for herself. And there's lots of pictures of us
at
various stages.
She never did show. She never had a critic, Greenberg, or was there famous Greenberg?
Yeah,
saying that her work was great or anything, but you knew her work was really good.
Oh, her work's
That's your judgment.
It's stunning when
you
people
don't think
see
you
it.
were being. You don't think you were being prejudiced because it was your mom.
No.
Okay, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think so. No.
And were there artists around in the family and everything or artists or intellectuals? We should say, maybe expand artists to be intellectuals as well, or people that are concerned with things,
Yeah,
I don't know if that's fair to say.
Yeah, some. I think that certainly my mom's brother, Andy O'Rourke, became county executive of Westchester County.
Wow.
And and a federal judge, actually, and he was very, very bright and is very bright and still. And and so we certainly had him in the family, but we all, we were all interested in the theater, especially. I remember when we had literally no money. So what we would do as soon as we came of age, we would go to the Actors Fund and donate blood. And if you donated blood, and they did this once a year, you would get 2 orchestra seats to a Broadway play.
And
so we would all go, and
the whole family.
The older kids would donate, and then we'd have enough tickets to all go to the theater once a year.
So it was really a love of the theater, right?
A love of words.
Words. Well, that's a great thing. You have books and whatnot
and
around the house?
art in general. Lots of books.
Art.
And the library was a very,
Did you have philosophical treatises? Some people put the arts over in painting and sculpture and that kind of thing and leave it there. But there's a commonality between the intellectual philosopher, or you know what I'm saying, rather than the just concern with the mundane.
I think we got most of our philosophy about life through literature. Not reading. I didn't read philosophy till I went to college, really. But it was just a love of story and a lot of storytelling and Irish family. Lots of sitting around.
I was going to assume it was Irish.
Yeah,
right?
Lots of sitting around and telling stories and putting on shows. A lot of my dad's family, we would, in fact, one of the stories in the book is about us going to the Brooklyn Yacht Club, which was not exactly what you think of when you think of a yacht club. It was actually at the end of an unused pier, and it was not very glamorous. But we would go there, and we would put on shows. We would show. We'd go for shows. And everybody would make a contribution.
But was there a make-believe quality to that when you're doing that? You're going down. It's not a real yacht, but we pretend it's a yacht. And make-believe, is that part of the intellectual freedom of the artistic sensibility? I think
part of the artistic sensibility is to gather and believe that it is worth your time to do so, and it is worth your time to do whatever it is that you find valuable in terms of expression.
And I can't hear all of this about your life without knowing it was full of a lot of good humor.
Oh, very good.
There must have been a lot of good, well-meant humor and everything like that.
Very. But
it sounds like a very privileged upbringing.
Isn't it interesting? Despite the fact that we had no money.
Yeah, right.
It was really interesting.
It should be such for all if we could, because there's a whole lot of other things. So I heard you say college, and you went to school, public school. And when you said you came to New York, do you mean you came to Manhattan from Brooklyn, or?
Yes, we actually moved from when I was about 5. We moved into the housing project, which was in Staten Island, and then when I grew up, I moved into the city, and I actually just recently came back to New York to live on the Upper West Side and not far from where we are today.
That's what I'm saying. You used to walk by here and didn't know what you were walking past.
I didn't know what I was.
You're going to know henceforth. You're going to know henceforth, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to try and enlist you to become one of the crew over here, one of the gang. This is a good place. Anyway, so you went on to college and everything.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and where and what and?
I actually went to, at that point in time, I got married quite young, and I had my son, and I did not go as a traditional student. I went back to school to the University of New Hampshire, and then I was admitted to Harvard, and I did sister studies between Harvard and University of
Harvard College,
Harvard
undergraduate.
University, in Boston,
Yeah. And you did that in literature, or?
I did actually, I got a self-designed degree, because by the time I did that, I was publishing a great deal of poetry.
Well, we hadn't even got to that poetry.
We
do a lot of.
Yes, I do a lot of. That's actually most of what I've done in terms of what I've published.
Okay.
It's poetry, and so when I was going to school and a non-traditional student, I was also attending fellowships and being given residencies at artist colonies and things like that.
Okay, yeah.
Because of that, I was a sort of an anomaly. They didn't really know what to do with a student who was doing these very master level kind of things, and so they let me create a self-designed degree in creative writing.
So you did, apart from that, you would do poetry readings and that kind of thing?
Yeah. And
Seems to me I've been going to poetry readings for about 60 years.
Really?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, it's a long time. I had poets, a lot of friends of mine in my immediate life. I used to just teach and stuff, but I would go to that. And I had a friend of mine, and my remembrance of it is going, and there's these very good people, maybe a couple dozen or something around, warming their hands over coffee, and somebody's saying a poem, and there's this, and then the wow, and everything. Not overwhelmingly commercial, if that's the right term, or whatever.
Right.
But I had a friend of mine call. He was a friend back in the 60s, Rizzy, really good poet, really good artist, and everything. Said he was going to read at the New Eurekan. There's a poetry house here in New York City.
Yes.
And he said he was going to read, and he said, well, I should go. And I was expecting a dozen or 10 people or something, not really overwhelming. And I went there, and there were hundreds, and they were up the wall. They had these things out. It was a thing in that, and they were reading poetry, and it's alive and well.
It is.
Poetry is alive and well, and they got these things called slams now. Are you?
Yeah, I was going to say, especially now that you have actually performance poetry and slam poetry.
That's different. So performance poetry and slam go together in a sense. As a genre.
Yeah.
Well, when somebody used to do open mic at a poetry club, at a coffee house, wasn't that, that was like public performance?
Yeah, I think you can perform, you can read your poetry, which I think of as a very separate thing, as the way I think of performance poets.
Oh, I see,
Performance poets feel to me like a really interesting blend of literature and performance in theater.
Right.
And so performance poets very often aren't reading. They have.
Oh, they've got. Yeah, it's a stick.
It's like in their head.
Yeah, right.
Much the way an actor would.
Yeah, it is.
And I think when they're very, very good at it, you get that sense that you're watching amazing theater. It almost makes me think about what it must have been like to hear or see theater in Shakespearean times, where everyone spoke that way. And we're basically speaking poetically. So it's a very different. To me, it's a very different genre, but it's wonderful, and anything that can be done to fan the flames of
absolutely.
That
was it. That really knocked me out. And they said that it was they have like the world, and then they vote. The guys vote, and somebody say
like the
this
Olympics,
and that.
they hold.
That's right, the Olympics. This guy gets it, and so there's a competition, and then they have a World Series of that.
Right. Yeah.
That's an idea. That's like what do they call it? American Idol is on television, where somebody can sing or something.
Right.
And then they're good singer. They have what they call talent or something.
Right.
There's one called America's Got Talent.
Yes, I believe so.
And that's a very popular venue now. People would view that. And
I'm wondering if poetry, though, is.
Well, I'm wondering.
Would get enough of a viewership. I'm not sure.
Well, if you got real poetry, if you had real Will Shakespeare up there doing it, heartfelt, I wonder if he'd get very much applause or not. I wonder. I don't know. But anyway, that it's alive and well, and that they got this. They have the World Series. They have a big competition thing that's going for. But I'm happy to hear that poetry's alive and well and working. And you've been involved in it. I didn't realize you'd been that involved.
Yeah.
You were at Harvard, took a degree there?
I did. Well, my degree actually technically came from the University of New Hampshire, even though I did a bulk of studies at Harvard. Mm-hmm. It was a joint effort. They did this. It was a great opportunity I stepped outside of this system.
Yeah.
And that was really nice because they both accommodated the fact that I was not in any way, shape, or form a traditional student. No. It wasn't just my age; it was the fact that I had done so much.
But your age? What do you mean? Were you older? Or
I was. I didn't go back to school till I was 30.
Oh, that is older.
Yeah, so you're older. You're non-traditional in terms of the age, but also I just I remember my first class in Shakespearean literature.
Yeah.
I was at the MacDowell Colony on a very prestigious fellowship.
Yeah.
While that was happening.
Yeah,
And so
that's
the
right.
professor, was,
You're from MacDowell.
She
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
I said to her, I will be away for the beginning of the semester. I'll just miss the first 2 classes. And I said, I would hate to do it, but I can do the work. I'm on a fellowship.
Yeah.
And she was stunned and said, okay, let's work around this.
Yeah,
and
right.
we ended up being more like colleagues in the class.
Yeah,
because I
right.
devoted, not only had I been born and raised in Shakespeare, I
Right,
mean, literally we
right,
read it and performed it in our house.
Right.
But I also was just an avid a fan of it and thought a great deal about literature.
And you had a body of work that preceded you then? A lot of the poetry had been published, you said, and so forth, so you had a body of work and you were recognized.
So that was part of, actually, I had to do like a dissertation.
Yeah.
In order to get my degree, I had to...
was that to get the doctorate degree?
No, that was just, was an undergrad.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
A dissertation, they called it that.
Yeah, it was actually a portfolio of all of my work.
Yeah.
And I had to talk about the writing process and the creative process and create this document and then go before a board. And they gave me a bunch of credits at one time and it allowed me to finish my degree.
Okay.
So it was brilliant. I loved doing it too. I met some amazing, wonderfully.
You think the performing thing of the slam in that is that we're going to talk about a lot of things. The trouble is you're too darn interesting, Amy Shea. But anyway, we could talk for hours and everything. But we want to get to the book and everything. But this thing about the arts and what do you think about the emerging media context? We were talking a little bit about Marshall McLuhan and James Joyce and literature and so forth, Will Shakespeare earlier, but the world seems to be going. What do you think? The world seems to be going very rapidly in a way that wasn't available until just yesterday. Multimedia, multisensorial.
Right.
And we're talking on television now, and it's merging.
Right.
Have you? Did you enjoy reading out in public or doing multimedia things?
Oh, yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love. When I was a poet, I used to read as often as I possibly could.
Okay.
And I love. I'm on a book tour right now, and so I've been promoting the book. I just came from promoting it in New Mexico, and I'm back and doing a reading in Phoenix next week. So. I'm having a wonderful time doing that. But I actually think what's going on right now in terms of the media is that you have this deconstruction of only powerful or wealthy people making things because of the internet and what's happened with the ability to create, where it's big time challenges to copyright laws and things like that, because people are doing mixes of all kinds of cultural pieces and challenging what it means to actually own something. And I think it's
an artistic property.
Yes, exactly. And so if you take a song and you lay in your visual collage, or you're doing any kind of mashup of things, it's really where
a lot of creative stuff's going on.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah,
amazing.
Right.
And I think we're in a kind of renaissance around that because of the technology. The technology blew the walls off that. I think much in the way that Gutenberg, with the printing press, at some point enabled people to stop writing out manuscripts, enabled things to get printed, and of course it took time before you could actually, just get something like this for the everyday household. The preciousness of books. At one time.
It was limited to very few. Those monks it would take them years to make a beautiful. It's art, calligraphy and everything, but it was a very limited thing.
Very
it was limited to until you got a mass that had huge implications. Now, and there was no thought of anything. And then, other than the printed word, particularly the phonetic alphabet, McLuhan thought Western civilization was largely tied into the effects of the phonetic alphabet. And he talked about the medium as the message. And the medium by which you communicate is more important than the message. But people concentrate on the message, all of that. But it's coming now in the modern. Now everything's coming exponential. It seems almost through the computer.
Yeah.
I mean, it came film, and we had radio, and then film, and then we got television, and then we got cable television, and we got internet now, and now it's going, and all of those things are just going exponential.
You know, look at film.
Are you investigating things in terms of those new electronic media and so forth as being part of the way in which you can express yourself?
Oh, sure, sure. And the way in which, way in which they work and how people interact with these devices, and the way in which citizens block messages from brands, and all the kind of stuff that's a very interesting thing to me, to understand what it is that's growing, evolving out from basically from the citizenry.
From the citizenry.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes,
it's democratizing.
Yes, it's democratizing. I think
in a very, very wide pattern.
Very much so. And I think you just look at what it is to make a film now. You can relatively inexpensively make a movie with the cost of equipment down to the ability to edit it. And so you have all kinds of voices. Now the mainstream hasn't caught up with allowing these things out into the world, so that's why you see this proliferation of independent film festivals and things running on the web. All this kind of stuff is happening as a result of this stuff being created.
Yeah, that's right. But it's all well and good, but it's also very, very good to know that when you're talking about even the old classics and that sort of thing, it's really good to have a really good writer.
Yes.
The writing does matter.
The writing, yes.
So
they're finding that out at the.
We had a program once with what was her name? Alexandria Fuller. I don't know if you ever heard of an author, and she was South African. No, she was Rhodesian.
Okay.
Settler Rhodesian, and he'd written a book called Scribbling the Cat. Really good book. I could hardly put it down. But she said to me in the program, we talked about authorship and so on. She said she thought all writing ought to be cinematographic. So that you're not just writing the interior of the mind or something.
Right.
You're writing about the context, and the wind is blowing, and all writing should be cinematographic. I don't know if things are moving that way, or having like a screenplay.
Right.
Where you have certain kind of direction. If you ever do directing theater is one thing, and theater is one thing.
Right.
Big film's another. Screen is another, but thinking multimedia, multisensorial.
Right. But if you're a writer writing a screenplay, basically what you're focusing on is what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Not the interior of the mind, and you have to express that through dialogue, and that's why it's such a collaborative effort in film.
You don't think you can do that through nuance and so forth?
Absolutely.
Eye gesture and all that?
Of that.
That's part of the great. Remember, acting is another part of the artistic.
But the actor will fight you on that if you give them, if you overdirect them.
Yeah,
if you have good actors, they know what it is. They want to understand what it is you are doing on the page, but they bring that to life. Film is an incredible collaboration.
It is, and it's burgeoning now. I think, too.
Yeah, it's
and
fascinating.
they just had this thing. I don't know if you saw it. It was called Newsroom, that the HBO people put together.
Oh yes.
Did you see any of that?
Yeah,
I loved it. I thought it was great. It was
yeah.
Alan Sorkin. He's a good writer.
Oh, Sorkin's
and the
amazing.
acting, and it's a collaborative thing, because the acting and the directing and the video and the way it's got a sort of like almost like a Ken Burns effect in terms of how they move from one thing to another. There's things coming in, and very quick lines, very good writing and everything. And without the writing, you're not going to have a hell of a lot.
Right.
It seems to me, anyway.
Right.
Have you thought about going into screenwriting? Or
I have, actually, and I've written a couple of screenplays just to try to figure out how they work.
Try to float them anywhere?
Just to, no. I wanted to figure out how they work, and I'm actually about to begin. That's my next project as I'm promoting this book. Is to go out and I have a writing partner, Sarah Jo Fisher, and she and I are working on going to start a screenplay. We're doing the notes for that now.
We got a program here. It's called Herflix. There's
really?
people. Yeah, it's a thing about women directors. Ida Lupino was a woman director. There weren't many. It was a men's thing and everything, but it's a great place for feminine input, it would seem, in terms of that. So you may be right on the cutting edge of a whole nother burgeoning of your artistic...
Or my next life, yes.
Or your next life, yeah. Maybe we can
I've had many.
Maybe okay, good. That's good. We touched on some of them here now.
Yeah.
And maybe I would love to be able to, hope we might be able to recruit you as a producer over here to where we could come in on these MNN thing. I think there's a lot of creative people over here.
Oh, absolutely. There must be.
I'm singing the praises of this place. I'm sort of wedded to the idea.
Good.
But anyway, the book itself, now how did it get started? It's really fun. I'll read you again. Defending Happiness. That's something interesting in and of itself. And other acts of bravery.
Yes.
Now, why would one want to or have to defend happiness? You know, let's just parse it a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you come up with the title?
I came up with the title.
And what is it about?
Well, it's actually what I did was I've, as I said, been a writer my whole life, so I was very interested in kind of processing a few things and writing about a few things that had happened in my life. My dad had passed away.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. My my youngest had left for school, and I got breast cancer. Very surprisingly, not in my family, and I'm a very healthy person. And then at 49 years old, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so a lot of these three major events kind of came at my life at one time.
Sure.
And I had decided I wanted to start putting some stories together, and I just started writing them. So I never start with the title on anything, whether I'm writing a poem or anything. The titles always last.
Is it really? Okay.
Always last to me.
Is that other people?
No, I think other people sometimes, writers all have their own
there's
approaches,
different ways to get going,
But for me, the title came at the end because when I looked back over all of the stories, I felt that they all had this common thread, that I was making the point that one must defend one's happiness in the world in order to make a creative contribution.
That's interesting.
I think of happiness, and it's interesting you focused on the word defend, because Harold, as I've been out talking about the book, the biggest question I get from almost everyone is why I use the word defend, because people don't put those concepts together.
It is a little juxtaposition.
But I don't think of happiness as a soft thing. I think of, I've said if I thought of happiness, if I personified happiness, it would be wearing a black motorcycle jacket and have road rash on the sleeve.
I see.
I think our own happiness, we think about it in the United States especially, I think, very confused with the idea of pleasure and things and stuff and things that make us happy, exterior things.
Well, there's a lot of influences that are leading people to be externally oriented or exterior.
And my point
outer directedness, they call
that
it.
outer directedness, to me, the idea of knowing what it is that makes you truly happy in the world, and I mean below all that stuff, beneath the core of what you feel you must do, or what it is you really feel is your purpose.
A lot of people
ignore that.
I saw a thing on the television the other day that just depressed the daylights out of it. It was about education.
Right.
Education seems to be so Martian now. I mean, compared to the way I'm thinking of it, the formal education, it seems to be all outer-directed, kind of test to the score. Your score, you have to have a test, you have to do this, you have to do that. There's very little leeway in the thinking of what is education supposed to mean bring out. Or something.
Right, exactly.
But it was just a grim kind of story. This was in a lower class, I guess, or, underclass group in Houston, but it was on Frontline, a major series. It was really good. But it was so depressing, the pushing of there were a lot of good-minded people who were trying to encourage them to get that graduation. And they kept saying, if you didn't graduate, you're doomed. You're going to end up in the street. You're going to end up, all this. It was just a very, very negative picture of what it is to be a early teenager or something. I don't know how anybody get through teenaging.
Well,
I don't know. That's a little sidebar that I came up with, but it really impressed me negatively that there's so much of that. Education, I mean, learning is so interesting.
Yes.
Why does it have to be made
well, I think you can kill it if you do that and you turn it into this task. And
it's got to be sort of a kind of a freedom there or something, or maybe that's idealistic.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think the best teachers that I think if anybody looks back, and we get into these conversations because I do get asked about happiness a lot and how I think about it, and I don't think about it as this soft exterior focused thing. I think about knowing you have to know thyself, know what it is that you feel is your purpose in life.
Well, that's a biggie for a lot of people.
It's very hard, but I think that shouldn't our job, as if we're going to in any way interact with other humans, shouldn't it be to actually help them find that, or at least have those kinds of conversations? I felt it was incumbent on me as a mom to understand not what I wanted for my kids, but what they wanted for themselves, and how could I assist them in that mission.
Well, you have a deeper consciousness than a lot of People, I think what it is, so much of it is practical. It's all around money.
But
it seemed to be all around money. That's all they were thinking. When they were talking about, you need that degree so you can get some money. And it was all money, 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 money. It seems it's the only thing that seems to want to matter in terms of the modern society.
It's just the overemphasis of it.
Yeah.
It's
way overemphasis
of it. Because really, in essence, it's not that you can't just go, oh, money doesn't matter.
Yeah, right.
They've done these studies on happiness, and they talk about the contribution that finances or money actually makes. And it can make a huge contribution to one's happiness when you go from below the poverty line to being able to take care of your basic needs. They find that in these studies, however, when you go from being able to take care of your basic needs to where you have a great deal of wealth, that actually as you head more toward that extreme wealth, your measure of happiness, however they're measuring it in this study, drops. And that really there's not this exponential increase in happiness as you go and earn more money. So I'm not advocating an impractical approach. In fact, it's the opposite. To say, you know, I have worked my whole life. I've been an artist my whole life. Both of those things have had to happen simultaneously. I was a single mom. I had to raise my kids. And
you have how many kids?
I have 2.
Okay, go on.
And so the idea of doing both of those things and defending the importance in my decision to be a writer in the world. I also danced when I was younger. So doing those things, danced, modern
ballet?
Dancer,
Modern.
And so as I was doing that, I really felt that I needed to continue to make a contribution as a human being and wanted to do those things in the world. And so the way I've always thought about happiness was, especially being raised in a very dangerous neighborhood, that became increasingly so, that to be an artist and to be a sensitive person in that environment was very challenging in some ways, but I felt that I needed to defend the right to show up or to be here, and that
on the
less
stage
a right,
of life.
more like a contribution, I would say.
To show up here on the stage of life?
Yeah, because
That's overdrawn, isn't
I
it?
wanted to be here.
And
I felt if I was here, I should be able to contribute in some way. And I think that it's easy for those things to succumb under pressure, and it's less about, I think certainly there's financial pressure, but it's more about what you start to adopt as the ideals that you should meet. You should have this kind of car. You should have this sort of house. You should have this level of success.
Yeah, well, the society sees people primarily as those who are going to go out and buy.
Right. I mean,
and sell products.
It's
the selling, and it's that kind of thing.
Right.
I saw a group of psychiatrists had a thing done once. This may be a sidebar, I'm not sure, but it's subjective in my head. It's pretty valid, and I've used it on the air before. But there were psychiatrists, psychologists got together a testing, the way of measuring a creative state of mind. And also, when you were in that challenging environment, you had that family background.
Yeah, true. Absolutely.
That's really grounding.
I always say that, yeah.
What if it was the same kind of turmoil right there in the family, too? That would be really a tough burden to carry. But anyway, that's another issue. But they try to measure creativity as a state of consciousness. There are various states of consciousness you can have. One is a creative one, which I think you're singing the praises of.
Absolutely.
And everything in large sense. And then they try to put a chronological, a chronology to it. I mean, across the human experience, I mean, what age? Which age experiences these qualities that are that? And everywhere across the world, cross-culturally, everywhere in the world, it peaks at 5 years old.
Oh,
okay?
Interesting.
And then it goes down from there and they end up like us. But 5-year-olds are just absolutely gorgeous. They are absolutely without any artifice whatsoever.
Aren't they?
They are so honest and everything like that.
Yes, it's wonderful. Yeah.
But, you know, I don't know if that means anything or not, or whether creative state of mind is a really valid thing to encourage.
Well, you know,
or what other states of mind is, you know, somebody wants to deal for justice or other kinds of issues. There's a lot of issues to be dealt with.
But that's, you know, that's my point that I really want to make is that this isn't just about artists. It's
You're
about
right. I
how
wanted to expand the artist.
Yeah, how
before,
do you go out into the world, and anything that you do, you bring.
I heard you use the word purpose.
Yeah,
is that, you think
your
it's
own.
purpose?
Yes,
yeah,
that you have. If you are you're going to do a particular thing with your life. Are you bringing your original self to that? Are you really showing up and doing this with your own creativity and tact?
Or are you just doing it to get a grade?
Right. And so if you're not, I think and my end point is not that this is, and I return to this idea of happiness as being soft.
Yeah.
A culture where this is thriving.
Yeah.
People make contributions.
Yeah.
They are there with their passion intact and their energy intact.
Yeah.
They're going to make a culture
that
is brilliant.
And they're going to get some good positive feedback from those around them. And
so let's do this.
Yeah,
okay?
I think we ought to do it for everybody.
If we're here, let's do it.
I think that may be our mission in life is to get it to where let's just say in a certain sense, purpose. Purpose is an interesting term. You think you could be living without any particular purpose. You could be carefree or something. But purpose is an interesting thing, and it would be good if we could get a world. We got like 100 trillion cells in a human organism. That's about what it is. I guess 90% of them are bacteria in the gut and so forth. But 100 trillion cells, and every cell matters, and every cell is connected to every other one through DNA and that sort of thing. It's a metaphor, right? Now, how much of the human there's so many, just at the material level, there's such challenges over which people fight a great deal and so forth, over the sheer lack of just at various levels, but just material existence. Has to be one of the major problems. And what we want to do, wouldn't it be wonderful just to kind of imagine a world where everybody is able to realize their own inner-directed, given, totally full application of all their capability in a creative manner. A liberated kind of context writ large to everyone.
Right.
So everyone doesn't have to be compromising to other things or lesser standards. That kind of a goal, that would be like utopian or something, but it would be like a Maslow's top thing, but for everybody, and even one that would include the ecology. And we may be coming to the point where we have the capability of having that in a way that historically we never have had. We were gestating through 200,000 years of human evolution and existence.
Right.
And we're now coming to a new realization, perhaps in the universe or something. I don't know, maybe that's going off the deep end or something, but I think we're coming to the end of the human experience.
I think that whenever this idea of a grand purpose is not really what I want to convey. It's more that in all of these stories, it's about how was I present in whatever that was? How did I agree? Like when I had cancer,
that's a big,
when I got breast cancer, the name of that story is called Cancer Gift.
Okay.
And it's called a gift because what it did was really imprint an expiration date on my consciousness.
Okay.
And I decided that if
From the words of the mouths, out of the mouths of the doctor with their diagnosis or something?
They just said, in fact, the first
you
thing they said.
You hadn't thought about
nobody thinks about
mortality.
it usually. You think
Not
about
when you're
it
young,
in a
you
very
think
abstract way.
Yeah, right. You're absolutely right.
You think about it very abstract. You know everyone dies.
Yeah, right.
And that you're in that everyone
We're going to
group.
be airing a program this week with a man named Volt, who wrote a book on death. It's really interesting. Psychology. I mean, Ernst Becker wrote on that, and it's a big issue. It's there subconsciously.
Right.
And
but it changed to me to be able to look at my life and say, okay, I'm going to be present in what happens. My purpose inside of this cancer experience is not just to get well, which of course was a purpose of that.
Yeah.
It was also to let it change me and let it touch me and let me experience it. I didn't want to be in this situation where I walled off anything. At the same time, of course, that I took very good care of myself, and I was tethered to an amazing group of people that saved my life. I think it's important that when we think about purpose, that our purpose is to be fully present, whatever we're doing. So when I'm, as an artist...
It's a universal thing?
I'm saying that it's accessible to anybody. Right now, you and I are present right now in this experience of talking to each other, right? So our purpose is to have a good good conversation that's completely spontaneous.
Yeah, I love it.
And real.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we have to be fully present to have
like
this happen.
Spontaneous. Yeah.
Right. We have to be here. You and I have not rehearsed anything we're talking about right now.
We have to. We've gone through this 1,000. This is the search take. I'm making a joke. I haven't rehearsed it at all. No.
So I mean, it is. My purpose in this interview has been to be completely present to whatever
this
happens
is not
in
a
this
conversation. No, it's not this is not an interview. Right. Interview is more like PowerPoint.
Right.
Structure.
Right.
It bespeaks structure.
You're right. It's a conversation.
Conversation is more like
I agree.
Two guys jamming.
Right.
Or a guy and a gal jamming.
Yeah.
You know, for free-form jazz.
Right. Exactly.
You never know what's going to happen when you open your mouth. You just need to relax. And that's sort of an interesting way to relate to one another. Yeah.
Right.
So that's it. So that purpose is, do you think there's an overall purpose to evolution in the universe or anything like that? Do you ever get to think about that? What's it all about? And that's where I go to. I'm thinking we're coming to the end of, we've been here, we got all this knowledge. We're just coming to an absolute explosion of knowledge in terms of things that are coming. Every day, Amy, there comes over the transom 10 new earth-shattering discoveries in every field, everywhere.
Yes.
It's like a quickening.
Yeah. At the pace is quickening, for
You've
sure.
experienced giving birth, and you've gone through a long period of gestation within yourself and everything, and then this thing, and then there's something I understand called a quickening or something, and then there's a thing, and then the new appears.
Sure.
It happens in evolution. The new appears.
Right.
And I think we're down existentially the point, and this is a job for intellectuals, are falling down on the job. There's very few, like this intellectual process itself, universities or otherwise, has all been divided and conquered by a certain sense by specialization. They've got the academic, there are practically no systems thinking going on in large scale anywhere. Mm-hmm. Everything's broken down into like, because particularly with the linear regression of the computer, you can go exquisite detail into anything. Right. So you can go down and, like I've used an example, people have heard it, just listen again. Somebody will write a treatise on the use of the pluperfect tense in 13th century French literature in the southeast corner of the Provence. And they'll know everything about that.
Exactly,
you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And they can really know it all.
More and more about less
every
and
jot
less.
and tilde. Yeah. And that's what the educational process is being done.
Mm.
I don't wonder those kids are suffering in there. There's no systems thinking. There should be a department of everything.
Yeah.
Because everything is interconnected as a system.
The contextualizing of
do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
Or it should be, and there's not enough of that.
Well, I think that's what artists are doing. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting, Harold, because I went to the movies recently and was watching all of these previews, and probably 3/4 of them were about some kind of Armageddon, the end of civilization.
Well, I think that's the sense that they have that. And you notice all those movies that are projecting that, it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger or some awful thing that's coming from the future that's going to destroy. It's all negative.
Yeah, it is quite. I think
that ought to be righted in terms of what might well be more in the offing, which is it could be very negative or very positive.
Right.
I mean, when you get to the point where you got weapon systems and a realpolitik basis for political organization of the planet, and all kinds of power politics kind of things relating to human organizations that is held throughout 200,000 years of unjust human organization, if you can understand what I mean. A few people have all the control over everything, everyone else wallowing around in the mud like slaves or whatever, and everything like that. And you get down to where geopolitically, whoever's got the gun wins, and all these romantic things about, that's what happens, really. They conquer and everything. And it still holds. And now the weapons have become species lethal. About 1970, about the time you were born. It's or I don't know when you were born, but I mean, you're young. But it is, they became species lethal. And they're still jiggling with the old institutions that we got out of history with an entirely existentially new capability. And on the other side, Fuller and some of the other systems thinkers have come up with adequate understanding of how we could liberate the entire Homo sapiens species with technologically augmented capabilities, ecologically based, appropriately based, make it so everybody could be, no woman would have to worry about letting her daughter or one of the daughters die because there's not enough food or something. All the insanity of where we don't do, we got a capability of actually having transcend scarcity, which has been the context out of which all human institutions have gone. So that's got to be there somewhere. But they never stress the fact that there is an alternative. And but the existential threat is taken in the movies, like you said, the ones you see. It's all disaster because people sense that everything's falling apart.
But
and the old systems will not serve. We need new ones, and there's no leadership coming from the intellectual community because they're all specialized out trying to get a grant or tenure somewhere.
Yeah, but I do think, you know, I think that what is happening too is because of this, ultimately, to return back to the beginning of our conversation, which was about this this democratization of access to creation of art and film and all of these new, especially these new methods.
Yeah.
I think what is really interesting is that this stuff is coming out. You see a lot of talk now again about Buckminster Fuller's.
Do you see it?
Oh yeah, out on the web.
Do you really?
Oh yes, I absolutely do.
Do you? I'm really encouraged to hear that because I begin to think.
And you're hearing a lot about theories of abundance.
I know. I did a search the other day.
That's been really interesting to me too.
Wait a minute. Do you realize what a difference that is?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's
you know,
amazing.
you could just
it's
whisper.
This counter.
There is enough.
Yeah, there is enough.
There is enough. There is enough. Of course, there's not enough. We got to go steal it from them. It's all still stealing in the same old way of that. There's not zero sum.
Yeah,
isn't it? Don't you see the conflict between that as a thing? And the fact that it's not voiced. It's not voiced in the popular culture.
Right, but you know, it's not. It's never a smooth and an easy process. I think.
But don't you think it should start informing the political class or even the intellectuals talking head class on television or something, that there's something blowing in the wind that's new and available and artistically there, rather than just reifying the outdated institutions out of a history and trying to reify it all.
Right.
And who's going to win the election and these kind of talk that it makes up the talk. There's no inspirational talk about what the human condition is or what the parameters are of possibility.
But what I'm saying is
that's the intellectual's job, and they're not getting a voice or falling down on the job. One of the two.
But they are, you know, this nonetheless, it's still rising up from the bottom of everyday culture, and that is, and it no longer can be held back because you now have access to the methods of creation and access.
I'd like to get a word in for public access cable television.
Yep.
Mind?
Go for it.
Do you mind if I
No.
sneak in a thing?
No, go right ahead.
No money involved. You can come and be creative. It's all free. Come and join. Become creative. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
So yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's these sorts of things that enable that to happen. And when I've been on the book tour, I've been talking a lot about storytelling as a way. You know, I could have written a self-help book, if you will, or some kind of book like that.
Yeah.
I had no interest in that because I think humans learn by stories. And I think that's how Robert McKee, the very famous script writing guru, and in Hollywood, who's just done these brilliant classes. I've been to 3 of his workshops. Says that stories are equipment for living. Okay. And I love that quote because I think they indeed are equipment for living. And I think they give us options as we look at them and we see the way in which people have faced what they've faced.
Right.
And so the feedback on the book has been that people who read it, they may not have had breast cancer, for example, or they may not be facing the death of a dad or any of the other things, and just aging in general.
Yeah, these do come up in life.
Right, they come up in life, loss comes up, and these kinds of things.
Right.
But by reading a story of someone and how they approach that, it helps them frame their own experience in that. And so that was what I wanted to write the book. Yeah. I wanted it to have air in it, so someone could breathe their own air. Not just
right. And did you write it all in one full swoop, or did it go over a period?
It took me a year.
A year,
because I was earning a living at the same time, and so what I did was I wrote. There are 12 stories, and I literally took me a year. I wrote about one a month over weekends and when I could squeeze it in. So that's how it.
Did you ever set up in your mind how many there were going to be when you started, or just sat down and started writing?
I just started writing them.
And did they come all at once? I mean, did the thing come all at once, or did you do a lot of editing or not?
I do a little bit of editing. I at this point in my career, I've written so much that it's more of a kind of give and take as I'm writing it. Then I'll go back over it and do something, but pretty much no.
Yeah. You do that, and so could these be the basis of little vignettes that could be put into multimedia? Do you think?
I think so, for sure.
You think? Do you write? I wrote about Alexandria Fuller saying write cinemagraphically. You don't write cinemagraphically, or do you think into account the environmental context, the wind and the thing and the time?
I wouldn't say
I don't know. I'm not sure because I'm not a writer.
I think what you get a cinematographic sense of is not only the person who's speaking, but the environment and context I'm talking about in the book.
I think she was too. Yeah.
So I think it's more that I do think that I love dialogue.
Yeah.
And I tend to think like that. So so talking. The narrative voice is very important to me, and I enjoy writing that. That way.
Well, listen, we got about 10 minutes. We got about 5, 6 minutes, 10 minutes left. Is there anything? Do you think you might want to read one of the little sections from the book?
Sure, I will.
You don't have the one where you talk about investment bankers, do you? Or no, you read what you want. Just a thing, because she writes on these long. Would be seen by some as, I see them as like sort of run-on sentences that are really inclusive and with a lot of punch at the end, and you write with such good humor.
Oh, I like to laugh.
Yeah.
I think laughter is extremely helpful.
Oh my Lord, yes. Where would you be without laughter?
Since I'm in New York, I'll read from a story called Travel, which is about the experience of traveling, and this actually starts with me in Brooklyn.
So you're not going to read the whole story.
I'm not. I just read a little piece.
Couple paragraphs.
I'll just read a little bit.
Okay. This is Amy Shea, Defending Happiness.
Recently, I discovered a picture of myself at 5 years old in winter, taken outside our brownstone apartment on Himrod Street in Brooklyn. Black and white, one corner torn, it documents two things. My mother's questionable decision to cut my bangs while having a highball, and the beginnings of what my family came to call my restlessness, the label they applied to anyone who changed their location without being forced to by the fates or the judicial system. One chubby screw-on hand juts out from a coat sleeve, clutching what I never was without, a water-stained cardboard train case, its surface carrying the stamps of places I did not know. More important even than London, Paris, and Rome, places I imagined came with white lace dresses, endless bowls of mashed potatoes, and no siblings, was the stamp that read New York. Understanding that Brooklyn was part of New York City, despite my father's protestations that it was a world unto itself, as evidenced by having trains running over people's houses instead of under them, I felt I must have already begun my glamorous, lacy life, despite being unable to find any evidence of it. I was sure my luggage would not lie. I need only keep my eyes open and get taller. Height, I believed, would solve many irksome problems. People of height not only could get beyond the startled eyes of the catch on ice in Sam's Fish Market, which always left me feeling nervous and without a love of the sea, but were allowed to have adventures. Adults who happened to be tall, I had noticed, were constantly thwarting adventures among short people, namely me, and occasionally my older brother. One adventure in particular I found especially thrilling when he jumped on the back bumper of a station wagon that had the audacity to drive through his street stickball game. That particular decision prompted my mother to run out of the house and down the front stoop, still carrying a dish towel, and unfortunately for my brother, a potato masher.
That's good. That's got all kinds of good humor built in there and everything. It's characteristic of your writing. It's like that.
Thank you.
Makes me think of I Love Mama. You know, they used to have that.
I do, yeah.
That was one of the first things that ever came on the television, you know, out of that. And I was seeing it as just being enacted and everything like that. That's really good writing.
So I think it isn't, thank you. I think it is cinematographic in the way.
I think it is too. It was. Well, you got the brownstone to start with. You got a set.
That's right, I have a set.
And then you can go
and
from
the potato
there.
masher.
Yeah.
And my little piece of luggage.
Also, but I remember, you know that series. You're maybe too young to remember that I Remember Mama. There was a series, one of the earliest. When we were in Detroit, I'm older, right? When we were in Detroit, the Second World War was just over, and our dentist friend who lived our family lived next door. One of our two families were in like one, and they bought a television set and they set it in the corner in 1946. There was no programming at all. There was no programming. It was anticipation. Had an Indian head test pattern. We'd look at the test pattern. You know, there was no, but it was coming, you know, that kind of thing. And so they finally started, one of the earliest ones was I Remember Mama, and there was the Goldbergs and Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, and the program started coming, and now they're coming in Niagara proportions. And I think that's really good. You could, that's a really good reading that could be done. And that was part of the story about your thing in Brooklyn. So how the book is available, I guess, is on the internet and all that stuff?
It's through our site, defendinghappiness.com, but it's also on Amazon and all the usual places.
Yeah. Are you trying to move over toward media, multimedia, or you're writing?
I want to write.
Right.
And I think even writing a screenplay, I don't think I'd want to be behind the camera. I really just, in terms of being a director, I think I would just like to write it and maybe give input, but
well, I'll tell
I love
you,
the writing process.
I see, I'm having reference now to something that political content just recently, is this front newsroom that was done by Aaron Sorkin.
Right.
And they had a thing, the writer, Aaron Sorkin. And he was also then there was somebody else, director, and somebody else, but then it was Aaron Sorkin. They could see their way through and see your way through, but it was the thing that carried it in a very real sense was the writing.
Yeah.
The writing is what's needed in language and everything like that. And they have have you seen the series at all?
I saw a clip that was making its way around the web of it, and Aaron Sorkin, I think, is a brilliant writer.
The Sorkin family.
Yeah.
I think, I'm not at all sure, but I think the other one, Too Big to Fail, which was also at HBO. They do a lot of stuff at HBO. Too Big to Fail, I think, was also a Sorkin. I think there's two brothers. One of our fellows here is Danny Darrow, is one of the guys. He was in that film. He was an actor in that film, and he's producing program here with another one of our producers, Gloria Messer, and he's just joined. And there's a hell of a lot of people over here that's creative that's coming on. And I'm going to, again, make a pitch that I think everybody from MNN would join me in saying you ought to try and get yourself involved over here, perhaps, or you should come and lend yourself and let's be in touch with you and so forth.
Yeah.
You were introduced to me by my dear good friend Whitehead, Buzz Whitehead, beautiful guy, great guy. You know him from where?
I know him from when I was a kid in the Housing Project.
In the Housing Project, yes. You go back that far.
Yeah, we do.
Boy, I tell you got a fan in Buzzhead. Whitehead.
Yeah, he's terrific.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, he is. He's a great guy.
So we're going to be doing that, and so it's just so much is going on. I congratulate you so much with the book. One other thing, and other acts of bravery. So you see, defending happiness and other acts of bravery. What other kinds of? Are you optimistic for the human prospect? Are you concerned politically at all, or do you have political thoughts or notions of how society ought to be organized, or is it all sort of not concerned directly with that, but more with individual stories about human dilemma and human experience?
I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing that we're getting pressured right now in the ways that we are. It's not a comfortable thing for us as humans, but I think that sometimes it's that discomfort that gives birth to us really finding our mettle, if you will. There's a great quote I love actually in the Bible. I don't quote the Bible too often, but they say, "An iron entered his soul."
An iron entered his soul. Okay,
and
stiffened his spine.
It's the idea that that when you find that times are so difficult, that you begin to really take a hard look at things. And so I don't necessarily think it's so bad that we're really stuck in some ways now. I think that it pushes us to really do something. Complacency can be the death, I think, of not only individuals but of a society. And so I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah,
okay. The Chinese warn about being born into interesting times.
That's
because
right.
Those are the most challenging. Yeah. We got no way of getting around. This is the most challenging time ever. In my humble opinion, I think we're coming to the very end of it's like a birth canal or something. We're going to come into. We've got the ability to annihilate the whole process of conscious evolution in this universe, or to liberate it. Yeah. What a time to be born into with such major challenges that are there before us. And let's hope that I would hope very decidedly we were able to get to the latter rather than default to the former.
And individual choice plays a role in all of that.
I think so. And individual empowerment.
That's right.
We should be empowering the whole of the society. So that's another real honest-to-God democracy rather than feigned democracy. Are all these challenges before us. And one of the major challenges is for the intellectual community to get some of these ideas and so forth into the public realm, and perhaps innovate some of the innovation among some of our established institutions that have to be anchored to history, but they have to be qualitatively subsumed and transformed in a new liberated order. So it's the birth of a new era. So it's an exciting time to be creative. And one of the most creative people I know is Amy Shea.
So much.
She's writing beautifully. And it's your pleasure to have had her perceptions, Amy Shea. Again, the book is Defending Happiness and Other Acts of Bravery, we might say subtitledly, in this hour of moment of qualitative transformation in the evolution of universal consciousness, an auspicious time to be born into with a creative capability. And thank you for fulfilling that so well as you have. And thanks for coming into the program.
Thank you. I enjoyed it so much.
Invite you to tune in again tomorrow. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. That's it for this particular program. Do tune in, and Amy, all the very best to you. And let's try to stay in touch with each other.
Absolutely.
Okay?
You got it.
Okay. Until next time, we'll be coming back tomorrow. Thank you for viewing.